everyone, I'm Andrea from Doctors of Running, and I'm here to talk about 3 lower stack performance trainers that I've been testing the past couple of months. The first one is the Brooks Hyperion Tempo. The second one is the Topo Cyclone 2. And the third is the Brooks Hyperion Max. I've really been enjoying running in these 3 shoes because personally I like lower stack plateless shoes, particularly for intervals. And it's been really exciting to be able to test all 3 and compare the similarities and differences in my mind and then be able to share it with all of you. So just to give you a quick rundown of the specs, the Hyperion Tempo and the Hyperion Max have a stack height of 8 millimeters, a drop of 8 millimeters. The Cyclone has a 5 mil drop. All 3 shoes have a similar stack height, with the heel in the low to mid 30s and the forefoot in the mid 20s. We don't know the exact stack for the Cyclone, but the Cyclone looks pretty similar to the Hyperion Max. As far as midsole material, both the Hyperion Tempo and the Max have DNA Flash, which is Brooks' nitrogen-infused EVA, and the Cyclone has a full-length midsole of Pebax, which is really exciting to see coming from Topo. In terms of weight, the Tempo comes in at 7.3 ounces, the Max comes in at 7.8, and we don't have a weight for the Cyclone 2, but it feels pretty similar to the Hyperion Tempo to me. So what are the differences in the ride between these shoes? So I've tested these shoes on easy runs and on intervals ranging from marathon pace, longer tempos, all the way down to mile pace. And there's definitely some differences in performance at different paces. As far as the rockers of the shoes, the Tempo definitely has the least rocker geometry. You can see that there's just a tiny little heel bevel and a really mild forefoot rocker in the front without much of a toe spring at all. Compare that to the Hyperion Max. Pretty significant heel bevel, decent forefoot rocker with some toe spring, definitely not aggressive, but enough that this shoe definitely gives you a rolling type sensation, even at easy paces. And then the Cyclone 2 has the most aggressive rockers. You can see pretty significant heel bevel and pretty good forefoot rocker with definitely more toe spring than either of the 2 Brooks shoes. So these geometry characteristics definitely give the shoes a different ride. The Tempo feels the most natural to me, of course, because it doesn't have much in the way of heel or forefoot rockers. The Hyperion Tempo also has the most flexible sole. That's pretty flexible for a performance trainer. There's pretty decent rubber coverage on the outsole, but the lack of rubber here in the midsole definitely adds to its midsole flexibility. The Cyclone is also fairly flexible and similar rubber coverage, heel and forefoot with a little bit of a gap in the middle. The Hyperion Max is the stiffest, not much flex anywhere. It's got more extensive rubber coverage that definitely adds to its overall stiffness. And the difference in sole stiffness also contributed to just how the shoes felt at different speeds. So as far as at easy speed, I definitely like the Hyperion Max the most. I've used it for runs up to 13 miles and really have just found it super comfortable. The rocker geometry doesn't feel aggressive at easy paces. It just feels nice and protective. The midsole is thick enough that I don't feel all of the ground, but it definitely gives enough ground feel that I still feel connected. The Cyclone, I like it at easy paces, but not as much as the Max. I think because of how flexible the midsole is, and that flexibility of the midsole actually makes me like it a lot more for intervals. Then looking at the Hyperion Tempo, this shoe I definitely wouldn't choose to use on like a long, easy run. Even though it feels fine for like warm-ups and cool downs, it feels more like a racing flat as compared to the 2 Brooks shoes. So, well, I did a 10-mile workout this morning with, a pretty significant warm up and cool down, and then some 2-mile pace intervals. And the shoe was fine for the easy paces, but if I was just doing a straight easy run, the Hyperion Tempo wouldn't be the shoe that I reach for. Whereas both the Cyclone and the Hyperion Max would be shoes that I would take on a long run without issue. But the Hyperion Max would definitely be my top choice for a long, easy run right now. When it comes to marathon pace intervals, it's kind of hard to pick which shoe I like best. They all perform really nicely at that pace, and even for like longer intervals, because I've been doing some longer tempos up to 45 minutes with some hills, and all three shoes just feel great at that pace and at that duration. The tempo, again, definitely feels the most natural, like it's not making me run in any particular way. And of course, again, that's because of the lack of rocker geometry and the flexibility of the sole. The Cyclone, even though it's flexible, it has this really nice rolling sensation. Because the forefoot is flexible, the forefoot rocker doesn't feel as aggressive as it would if the forefoot was stiffer. So I think that makes it work better for longer intervals as well. And then the Hyperion Max, it's just great at any pace. I've really been enjoying running in this shoe, and actually I'm really considering the Hyperion Max a good replacement for my beloved New Balance Beacon, which has been discontinued. So any Beacon fans out there, definitely check out the Hyperion Max because I think you'll like it. So as far as faster intervals, I've used all of these for like some extensive strides at mile pace, and then I've been doing a bunch of like 2-mile pace intervals, like about 1 minute in length. I think at that speed, the Topo Cyclone 2 is my favorite. The P-Bax just is a little more responsive than the DNA Flash midsole. And I think the combination of the forefoot rocker and toe spring in the Cyclone 2 with that extra little flexibility in the forefoot makes it perform the best out of the three shoes at that pace. But like I said, today I did that workout in this shoe and it felt awesome too. So I think it just depends what your preference is, if you like a more aggressive forefoot rocker and how flexible overall you want the sole. When it comes to stability of the shoes, they're all definitely neutral shoes, but the Max feels the most stable because it has the stiffest sole and it's got a much wider base than the other two shoes. And I think that also contributes to why I like it for longer, easy runs because of that inherent neutral stability. The other thing I really like about the Hyperion Max is the amount of lateral sole flare in the forefoot. I really feel like that helps me get off my lateral midfoot when I land and helps me load my first MTP a little bit better to prepare me for push-off. While the Cyclone 2 also has a little bit of sole flare, it's not as severe as the Hyperion Max. And because the sole is more flexible in the forefoot, you don't get that same guidance feeling that you get from the Hyperion Max. And the Hyperion Tempo, it also has sole flare, but it doesn't really feel like it's encouraging motion in one direction or another. It feels pretty stable to me. You can see that the rear foot and midfoot are pretty narrow, but where I land here widens up quite a bit. And then I like how wide the forefoot is for transition to push off. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and definitely check out these three shoes if, like me, you enjoy doing some faster workouts in plateless shoes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.